The central task of the religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind each to all. There is a connectedness, a relationship discovered amid the particulars of our own lives and the lives of others. Once felt, it inspires us to act for justice. It is the church that assures us that we are not struggling for justice on our own, but as members of a larger community. The religious community is essential, for alone our vision is too narrow to see all that must be seen, and our strength too limited to do all that must be done. Together, our vision widens, and our strength is renewed. These are the words of Reverend Dr. Mark Morrison Reed. Our stories, because many wise people tell us that we live out of our stories. That's where our truth is held in our lives. And so this is my half of the story. I see bigotry where others don't have to see it. I have to see bigotry and the threat and the potential for it. This is not a theoretical exercise, but a lived experience. You see, I lived away from being bashed, being robbed, and my life force being used as entertainment for teens with a pistol.
I see racism as my aunt walks over to the living room window, looks out at an African-American family playing across the street, and turns to me and says, "I'm not prejudiced, but I don't see why people should have to live together if they don't want to."
When Tennessee Valley UU called, I answered. I did so with pride and joy. I did so knowing they do the hard work of being there for everyone's freedom. But I also had to move from Dr. Martin Luther King's home to East Tennessee.
I see racism not of hatred, but of fear, in a grandmother who is afraid to go into a restaurant if there were too many people of color eating in the restaurant, until her grandchildren persuaded her otherwise. I'm not sure if the rock somebody throws is intended to hit a black guy, a gay guy, or a black gay guy,
who's a you-know-what.
I see the impact of racism in an African American woman who quits the Unitarian Universalist Church saying, "I already have 2 strikes against me. I'm black, I'm a woman, I can't be a Unitarian Universalist."
So when my seminarian housemate found us a house, she is a white lady who's living in another part of town from her family. I asked if she'd ever seen an African American walking through West Knoxville past the old mental hospital where the big pretty houses are. She said no.
I see racism and the impact of racism in the valiant and courageous effort of my parents who stood strong for civil rights, who worked for the integration of schools, only belatedly to realize the damage done to black traditions and black institutions when integration happens on white people's terms.
Do I take an offer of the wonderful home in the good part of town? Do I make my own way in a strange city in another hood all alone? No. I had her put out flyers informing the neighborhood. Guess who's coming? Who's moving in, with a lovely picture of she and I together.
I see racism in my conversation with my daughter when I explain to her that there are some people who will not vote for someone to be president because they are black, and she says, "Really?" in genuine surprise. And as I watch her and her brother make friends across the lines of race, and they don't even seem to think about race, and I can't help but think.
Most likely, not something my white colleagues have ever had to distribute. Not something everyone can see as a necessity. Or was it overkill? Sad that it is a necessity at all in my mind. One younger bald father made it his business to come over and shake my hand.
I see racism when we look backward in time and condemn those who own slaves, but do not ask questions in our time. Who picks our cotton? Who harvests our crops? Who makes our clothes? Who cleans our hotel room? How are they treated?
Those that will, those that understand do. The neighbors on the other side were sitting on their porch verifying the flyer, I guess. They are the only 2 people in all of Knoxville who have not said hi to me.
I see racism in a television network that is owned by an immigrant from Australia and hosted by immigrants from England as they rail against the problems of immigration. I see racism of fear. Racism of fear and racism of hatred used to create stampedes so that we trample each other like sheep without a shepherd.
Not sure what they're up to, where their minds are. Not sure what they feel or understand. But I know the difference between a handshake and a silent stare. Or am I supposed to go welcome them to my world?
My world. His world. Her world. Your world. I invite you over the course of this weekend to share your half of the story.
partnerships, like this evening. As we ponder our time together, how are we treating our neighbor? An ancient question asked of many wise people, who is our neighbor? Can we see our neighbor? Are we where we can see our neighbor's pain? Are we where we can feel our neighbor's inconvenience? Thank you for blessing our time together. And may our work be fruitful. So may it be.
I'm just thrilled at the group of you who have come together from the far reaches of our district. We have Newport News and Williamsburg and Richmond, Virginia. We have Columbia, South Carolina, and Beaufort, South Carolina. We have Kingston and Greenville, North Carolina, way on the eastern edge. We have a few people from Knoxville, I guess. We have Asheville. Where else do we have people from? Winston-Salem. Winston-Salem, of course. We have Winston-Salem. And then we have guests here from even farther places, from Phoenix and Denver and, great? Washington, D.C. Thank you. So we are just thrilled that you've come together in this community, and this is how we can be in spiritual community. This is our vision to create the beloved community together. We have to do this work. Thank you for being here. It's an honor, again, to be with all of you.
Unitarian Universalists have got to be known as the love people. And yet, to be known as the love people is not only an honor, it is also a challenge. Because love is not something that just shows up in the good times or shows up when things feel good. The challenge is not unlike that in the 1950s when there were certain laws on the books that were degrading and dehumanizing to some, and so were degrading and dehumanizing to all. And so people of a generous faith needed to answer the call of love and show up. It's not unlike the situation in so many states for years now and continuing. Laws on the books with respect to gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people that are degrading and dehumanizing to some, and so degrading and dehumanizing to all. So love shows up answering a deeper law than that law. And in Arizona, there are laws that are degrading and dehumanizing to some, and so they are degrading and dehumanizing to all. And those of us who answer to a deeper law, to the law of love, are challenged and honored to come forward, to step forward, and to answer to that deeper law than the law that might be on the books. Next summer, Unitarian Universalists will show up in Phoenix for Justice General Assembly 2012, and will show up to bear witness and to be in solidarity and to respond to that deeper law than the laws that are currently on the books, that law of love. And to be able to do this in a way that is not just exciting or action or activism, but instead emanates out of our deepest faith and our ongoing convictions, and that recognizes that Arizona is also Alabama, is also Georgia, is also North Carolina, is also Tennessee, that is everywhere that we are. We go to Arizona next summer to learn and to live out this love that is not only an honor, but is also a challenge. We need more than strategy as we bear witness. We need theology. And so to help prepare us not only for next summer Justice General Assembly, but for when we wake up tomorrow and the next day and the next day, we are very fortunate indeed to have with us today from Arizona, Tupac Enrique Acosta, who has inspired me and I know will inspire all of you.
say Kuali Iwaltik as well. Buenas noches, good evening, Kuali Iwaltik. Nekane no toca Tupac Enrique Acosta. Mi nombre es Tupac Enrique Acosta. We're here to roll our sleeve up and open up our heart and let's do some vision about what has to happen and what's going to happen and how it's going to be after. Today is the equinox. You know, you can get away with murder all day long, all night long, all month long, every year for 10 years, centuries. You can get away with murder until we, human society decides, okay, that's a crime. It's a crime against being human. And then processes and procedures are put into place to rectify and make corrective action to deal with that, no? And now, what we're talking about now is, and this is what we're proposing for as we lead up, not only what's going to happen next year when the congregations come to Arizona, come to Phoenix for the Justice Conference next year, to help us deal with the situation there on the ground in Arizona. And not only just that, but to continue on to what has to happen, what has to continue happening beyond that. And to give you a quick update version of the chapter where it is right now in Arizona. Just 2 days ago in Arizona, we hosted a festival of resistance that brought together about 3,000 people from all over. They came from Mexico, even from Canada and stuff. And we had an artist who's well known, Manu Chao, who performed. The theme of that conference, of that festival of resistance, which was a musical event, was called, was brought together under this theme, which was called Celebrating the Struggle in Defense of Civil Rights, Human Rights, Indigenous Rights, and the rights of Mother Earth. And in that moment, this was 2 nights ago, many, many young people standing up, participating. One of our leaders, of our community leaders, he brought that message forward to the assembly there, who was there to celebrate the struggle, celebrates the fact that we're struggling to deal with these injustices. And so when you say civil rights, we have to go back to it like this. Martin Luther King, in 1967, after Selma, he said, we have emerged from the era of civil rights to the era of human rights. He said that in 67 and 68, they assassinated him. We were organizing the march last year in May that brought 100,000 people to Arizona. They had 100,000 people marching in Egypt, and they got a lot of media coverage. We had 100,000 people in Phoenix, and it went like this. Snapshot. And none of that reporting reported that the indigenous peoples were leading that march, and when we got to the state capitol, the indigenous peoples there were receiving us with their traditional songs of welcome, because we had gone to that site, to that location, for the purposes of rectifying our situation in terms of what Jake mentioned at the beginning. What is this thing they're calling it? The law. And who's making these, what they call the law? And what's behind it? Where's the wizard behind that screen? You start asking. Some of these tombs that call themselves laws, some of these poems that call themselves laws, some of these concepts, it makes me think about Tea Party. Makes me think about Tea Party because when you start to peel it back, and you start to peel it back, and when you start to see it, one of the things that becomes evident is that In times before, they used to have this concept, and I'm not just talking about they, but I'm saying in particular thought was the divine right of, see, you guys are educated on it. The divine right of kings, right? Does anybody in this believe in that now? And why not? Why wouldn't you want to believe that there's a king and he has a divine right to after under him everybody's? Why? Why do we believe in that? Well, why wouldn't we also believe, for example, that the earth or the sun goes around the earth, right? Or heliocentric, excuse me, sir, what was it?
Because of the French Revolution and Thomas Jefferson.
Okay, because the French Revolution, because there was such a thing called the Enlightenment, and the French Revolution to where some of these doctrines, when you have a doctrine, what do you got? You don't got thinking going on, that's for sure, because a doctrine is like, it's a preset of ideas that have already been programmed into assumptions, like mentioned, you've already been programmed. I don't got to think about that, I just got to plug in my doctrine and boom, I'm ready to go. And so, these are doctrines that are in dissonance. I'm not going to say right or wrong, okay? I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm saying these are concepts that are in dissonance with reality. So to us, indigenous peoples, the indigenous peoples, not just of Arizona, not just of Old Mexico, or even New Mexico, or Canada, or even the whole, here comes a test question, are you ready? You might not be allowed to leave the Justice Conference until you answer this question. What's the name of this continent?
What's the name of the continent?
What's the name of this continent?
North America.
Since when?
The U.S. decided.
Well, let's get, no, wait, let's take a pause, because why do we want to go to Arizona if we're not willing to answer it or ask this question? If I'm right here, right, and I want to go there, well, let's do it. That was proof. If each and every one of you in this room did the same thing, none of you are going to go flying out to there. You're still tied like me to this Mother Earth. You're still here with us, bro. We're still related to this Mother Earth. Simple law of gravity tells you that. Did it just not tell it to you? The real question is how? It's not what, it's how. Do people like Jan Brewer, the governor of Arizona, how is it that people like Tom Horn, the superintendent of education for the state of Arizona, how is it people like Sheriff Arpaio conduct these atrocities and they're considered laws? They're considered valid instruments of social ethics. They go through the whole processes. But if you check them against reality, they don't stand up. The question is, how do these individuals of representation and authority in the society that, I'm pretty sure everybody's in the room is paying taxes, right? You don't have to answer. But we're paying for them. But how is it that these personalities of representation and jurisdiction and authority that are supposed to be are you still guys believe in the divine of kings? You don't believe that, right? Just checking. Anyway, how is it that these constituencies that are built on fear and ignorance are created and sustained? That's the crime. Because we're doing that. We're doing that. We can point the finger at Arpaio, we can point the finger at Brewer, we can point the finger at Obama, we can point the finger, but we keep pointing the finger, but we have to ask, how did this happen? How did we do this to ourselves? How did we create a constituency of humanity that is willing to amputate the humanity to participate in that atrocity? And how are we feeding into it? How are we supporting it? How are we being manipulated into perpetuating? These are the fundamental questions that we want to have the Justice Assembly address next year. Uta second language family is like being part of the Romance language or the Germanic or any other, the Sino or the Indo-European. Our language, the oldest root of that language in all of what is this whole world, Mother Earth, North, I didn't say America. Check it. Keep the chicken. 40,000 years. 40,000 years. So, when you come to Arizona, remember this. You might want to remember this. Why? Because you're going to hear the young people will come up to you, they'll converse with you and say, you know what? We're not immigrants here. We're not the immigrants here. Who else went to jail that day, Jack? Who else went to jail on the 29th last year? How many of us here? Okay. They said that we went to jail. However, when you look at Mother Earth at a planetary level, it looks like they got jails everywhere. They got borders everywhere. We're all incarcerated into conceptions of allegiance, of domination of the natural world with elites of political, military, economic powers that are telling us what to do, or would like to tell us what to do, such as believe that 1070 is not a law. SB 1070 is not a law. When those cops were there, the UUs were there on First Avenue in Washington, right? Those yellow shirts. I've never seen so many yellow shirts.
Wait until the summer.
Well, wait. Do you want to be arrested? That's what he says to me. So of course, what I tell him, I'm not here to be arrested, I'm here to arrest. You might take me into custody, but you're not going to arrest me, you're not going to stop me. You're not going to stop this movement. You're not going to stop this power. You couldn't.
Amen.
You had no jurisdiction, you had no power to arrest this. You might take me and my body into jail, but you're not going to stop me. I'm going to arrest you. I'm going to arrest, I told them, we're here to arrest injustice. That's what we're going to do. Even if it's just for a little millisecond of thought that it took for you to try to think out what the hell is he saying. That's what it's going to take. Just add another thought, another millisecond, and the pretty soon we'll have a whole second. Then we'll have another, after all we'll have a generation. And we'll have start to put in place what has to occur. Not just on this side, but in those cops' mind, in their heart, in their soul. I was so honored to come here today, and sad too, when I heard about Gregory Kendricks, and Linda. I don't know the last name of the Linda. Immediately I'm thinking, these guys know what it's about. So we're being called to that fight. How we come into that fight? Through the civil rights side, through the human rights side, through the indigenous people side, we are all being called to that fight because in that fight there is no they. It's all we. There's no they. There's no they.
We light this chalice this morning in appreciation of our being together again for returning safely from our night's sleep. May we see in this flame the souls of others gathered around fires since time began for the human family, circled around fires asking the most basic questions, providing for our most basic physical, mental, and spiritual needs. May we be blessed in our time together and this memory of warmth of the flame and the warmth of community. Amen.
Here we are in East Tennessee, which, as we all know, is populated by hicks and hillbillies. And yet, just down Kingston Pike, traffic today will be totally tied up by the St. George's Orthodox Church Fruit Fest. Downtown Knoxville will be humming not only with the regular farm market, but the Hola Festival, celebrating Hispanic culture in East Tennessee. And this afternoon in World's Fair Park, the African American community has organized a rally and march against violence. So that is the encircling space that we occupy today. And in this week, we are here in this week in which Troy Davis, a possibly innocent man, was executed by the state of Georgia. And it's also a week in which the state of Texas executed one of the men who dragged James Byrd to his death. We mourn all 4 deaths. We need to hold those close in this gathering in which we affirm life.
On the face of things, I am nothing but a privileged white woman, a mother of 2 small children, living in what our mayor calls a premier residential community, behind a 2-story brick facade. Oh, but isn't it that brick facade we have to look out for? Things are not as they seem. As the daughter of an Iranian father and an Appalachian mother, I identify as a minister of color. And many of my congregants find this funny. They joke that I am non-color, or even clear, but I think that's a different religion. My mother is moderately appalled by my saying I'm a minister of color, and my sister is vicariously honored. The same blood pumps through her veins as pumps through mine. But she is, as a family friend put it, she is the sister dipped in dark chocolate, and I am the sister dipped in white chocolate. And so perhaps she is why I am here, because I do not walk in skin dark enough to give pause, because I am white enough for all normal purposes. I have had a privilege since birth that she has never had. I can be loud, I can be outspoken, I can be direct, and then I can disappear. I can turn back into non-color. I can turn back clear. I am not a threat to anybody's system. I can risk, and I can risk boldly, because by walking around on a daily basis, I'm not at very much risk. But I know there are times and places where it's risky to look and sound Persian, kind of like Moroccans in New York are getting a little extra love from the police these days. Kind of like my husband got a call from somebody in federal law enforcement wanting to know, they were giving him the option that if ever had anything to share, he could feel free to call them. But he didn't know Homeland Security could be so friendly. Sure, the blood in our veins matters. Each of the children born to me came with dark blue marks across their rear ends. This kind of birthmark is common for Middle Eastern children, but not often seen in European Americans. My aunt was visiting from Iran, and she saw the marks of my newborn. She said in Farsi, she said, "Oh, it does not matter where you go in the world. It does not matter what language you speak or what language you have forgotten. The blood remembers. The blood always remembers." And so it does. The blood remembers. But it is the heart. It is the heart whose rhythms we obey. Before my children were born, before seminary, before suburbia and a 2-story brick facade, my husband and I lived on the edge of the District of Columbia, and we were foster parents in an agency where we were the only white foster parents. at all. Being young and without experience raising children, we opted to only take in medically fragile infants because they are small and portable. They came and went, these children, these little babies. They came and went, each child full of personality and beauty all their own. The hospital called us, the agency called us to the bedside of our last foster child, months before she was ready to leave the hospital. And we'd go visit her in the crib, and we would make this part of our routine. And I remember with crisp clarity the day the nurses took us into that consult room and set us on the sofa. They brought in the baby and they handed her to my husband, and she fit just so, 3 months old, with her head cradled in his hand and her feet coming almost to the bend in his arm. I loved her and him completely in that moment. Born too early with drugs in her system, she had spent most of her first 12 weeks in a crib by herself. And so the nurses told us to take her home and hold her close against our bare skin, close up to our chest where she could hear our heartbeat. And we did. And in doing so, she became ours and we became hers, and it is the heartbeat that unites us. Months later, in July, the agency called and asked us to please adopt her because they had nowhere else for her to go. And we had many serious conversations, my husband and I, because the truth is, as an African American, her experience of the world would always be different from ours. And to adopt her would mean making a commitment to remain part of a community where she could see people who looked like her, where she could learn from a wider community and learn things that we could not teach her. But we made that commitment for our family, but for the rest of our lives. We made that commitment, we said, with great joy. We said, yes, we will adopt her. But come December, a judge ruled that, and I quote from the bench, she said, "A black child belongs in a black home." And in April, we lost her. So maybe I am here to do this work for the sake of our first daughter. Maybe I want nothing more than a world where she will be safe and proud and celebrated for the beauty of her skin, the brightness of her eyes, and the resilience of her spirit. But to be honest, to be perfectly honest, I am not here for her, nor am I here for my sister, and I'm not even here for the children I have born. But I am here for the faith that will make us all free. The culture we live in teaches us to treat each other differently because of the color of our skin or the texture of our hair or the ethnicity of our names. And often the church has responded by saying that there are no real differences. There are no real differences. We're all just the same. You've heard this. This is in Galatians. There's neither slave nor free, man nor woman, Jew nor Gentile, but in Christ Jesus we are one. So the church says, no, don't worry about it. We're all the same. It's all good. But this is the same church that has remained segregated for nigh on 2,000 years. So I am here to embrace a new church. A church that says that tolerance, respect, and even love require our differences to be real. For if you and I and he and she are the same, then there is no need for anybody but myself, for I alone am all, and you are all. We need our differences. I dare not claim that we are all the same. We need to open our ears to the songs of others, to touch and be touched, to embrace and be embraced. For the beauty of this world is neither monochrome nor monotone. As Unitarian Universalists, we are realistic enough. We are strong enough and we are honest enough to see the harm we do to each other, to see the privileges we carry, and just as importantly, to see that we, every one of us, every last one of us, has the power to help make it better. Our Universalist heritage gives us a grace that will not let us go. So we can try and we can fumble and we can mess up and we can be forgiven and we can try again. For we have hope enough and joy enough and love enough to keep on working, to keep making the connections, to keep expanding the promise of the beloved community, to embrace one more and one more and one more. And by doing so, by this act of gathering up humanity and holding humanity as close as our heartbeat, we will be transformed. We will be made into a new, old thing, steeped in tradition and reaching for wholeness.
This is the very first Racial Justice Conference of the Southeast District. However, it is the 22nd or 23rd, we're not sure because it was one year where the snows came, and then there was last year when the snows came, but somewhere around that line of this conference continuing in the previously named district. So I want to tell you a couple of things. First of all, I want to introduce to you, if you have not heard about it already, a new campaign that we're starting in the Southeast District called Bending the Arc. We're going to pass these around to you. We think that part of our ministry in this district is this work in anti-racism, anti-oppression, multiculturalism, and the whole realm of social justice work. And we want your help, we need your help to support this work, to support the congregations that are doing this work, to be able to support getting our youth and young adults to Phoenix Justice GA. We heard Tupac and his invitation last night and the incredible witness that we expect to have there, and we need our young people there to go out there in the heat of the day and do stuff that some of us who are a little older may not be quite as adept at anymore. And so we want to provide scholarships for them. We want to be able to support states that are developing statewide legislative ministries like North Carolina that is fighting the North Carolina anti-marriage amendment on May 8th, and we'll be doing a lot of organizing around that. All of those kind of things take some resources. We're not asking for much. We're asking you to consider giving a small donation, much like what you might give to child sliders, a little bit more over 3 years. So $50 or $100 a year over 3 years. If those of us active in the district did that, we would be able to fund this campaign very, very well. So we would ask for your support in doing that. You'll be hearing more from Judy and Tom Turnipseed, who are sitting with us, who are our honorary chairs of this campaign, and you're going to be hearing more about it from them in written form. But please take this with you, and we'll have more information. But in addition to this, we also, as part of this campaign, we want to collect your stories. We want to collect the stories of what your congregations are doing and be able to spread that witness to those of us in other parts of the district so that people really understand the breadth of what they can do, who they can connect with, who's got some history working with different issues and so forth. So that's a part of this campaign too, to have a very viable social justice web presence for the Southeast. So please take these with you. The second thing I want to talk with you about is in 2008, I signed up for an amazing trip. And that trip was with the Reverend Gordon Gibson and his wonderful wife, Judy. Where are they? Oh, right here. And he took us on a civil rights tour of Mississippi and Alabama. And it was a transformative experience for me, just an incredible experience, so much so that with that, combined with the work that I do in the district, that I really began to see how important it was for us as Unitarian Universalists to learn what we did then, how we stood up then, and how we can translate that into the issues of today. How we can learn to be that courageous and strong and smart about the work that we did. And as part of that, we have created what's called the Living Legacy Project as a way to continue our legacy but live it into this century, live it into this world and these issues. So I'd like to invite those of you who are interested to join us on what will be the third official Living Legacy pilgrimage, about the 6th trip that Gordon and Judy have hosted and taken and organized. But it's happening in October of next year. It is a life-changing experience. If there's any way that you can go on it, please go. There's a number of people here who have been on it. Raise your hand if you've been on the Living Legacy pilgrimage. Okay, so talk to those folks, and you will really learn an amazing amount of that experience. And part of that story, part of that experience, I learned the story of an amazing woman, a woman who celebrated her 100th birthday a month ago. Dr. Amelia Boynton Robinson. Mrs. Robinson invited Dr. Martin Luther King to come to Selma. And we know what happened from there. Okay? It was her vision and her foresight that really was instrumental in organizing the Selma to Montgomery March. We are very honored to have Mrs. Boynton's granddaughter, Carver, with us today. Carver didn't have enough to live up to. Y'all have heard about the Freedom Riders, right? Okay, it was her father, Bruce Boynton, whose lawsuit, Boynton v. Virginia, that actually was the test case that the Freedom Riders came to see, the interstate travel. And so she has an incredible legacy. Her grandmother's mother was involved in suffragist movement and getting women's voting rights. So we're waiting to see, but you know. But we're honored to have her redevelop a relationship with Mrs. Boynton and with her son Bruce as we Unitarian Universalist organized and raised some money to help buy the house in Boynton in which much of this organizing happened, the house in Selma. And we are working with them to help to renovate that and make that a place where people can learn how to carry this work into the future. And then finally, our speaker this morning, Reverend Alicia Ford. Alicia joined the UUA about 3 years ago and is the coordinator of our multicultural congregations. So she is the person that's out there working with congregations who have expressed a commitment to become multicultural congregations that are involved with bringing in ministers of color into the congregations. And I have had the privilege of knowing her these last couple of years and really just love the energy and the spirit that she brings. She lives in Colorado, so she's you know, people think of the UUA as Boston. Most of the UUA does not live in Boston. We live all over the country. And Alicia is representation of that. And but she travels all over the country, as all of us do. And I think you'll really appreciate what she brings. She's a graduate of ILEF School of Theology in Denver, and has a lot of creative energy for us all. So please welcome Alicia.
Friends, what a joy it is to join you on this journey of weaving together heaven and earth, exploring the path of building the world we dream about. I don't know if you can see the slide, but that's what it says. It is a beautiful thing to dream, to cast a vision, to stretch our minds into the future and imagine what may be one day. To me, this is one of the wonders of the human mind, to launch itself into a version of the world that does not yet exist, to craft and create worlds that surpass current reality. It's actually one of my favorite pastimes, dreaming. My favorite imagining is I have my own cooking show and I dash madly about the kitchen, tossing ordinary ingredients into hot pots to whip up extraordinary dishes, all the while narrating my every move to an imaginary camera. Does anybody else do that? Glad to know I'm in good company. Fantasy that could be reality with some intention, with some planning, with some measure of focus. Your recent name change took intention, focus, real listening. That's what I appreciate about dreams. They can be the promises we make to ourselves, promises we make in community, promises that with some intention, planning, and focus will be fulfilled, will be made reality. What is this world we dream about? I think now of our Universalist roots. This world we dream about is one in which all souls are saved. All souls are saved. Such a juicy proposition, and I don't know about this area of the country, but where I live, it's one that all souls are saved can evoke some discomfort. That word saved, evoking images of a fiery hell or the lost, the left behind. And that's not the saved that I'm talking about. The healing and saving message of universalism is that all are loved, and there is to be justice for all in this life. It is a promise, it's a dream, one worth our intention, our planning, our focus. The healing and saving message is that our hands, these very hands, your very hands, hold the world, and these hands, your hands, do not do this transformational work alone. Your hands. Take a moment, look at them. Your hands. They belong to you. Leaders who are ready and willing to take risks of self-discovery, risks of dialogue, risks of telling, risks of listening, and risks of doing the work of casting a new vision for healing our fragmentation. The healing and saving message is that our hearts, these very hearts that right now are beating in our chests, are being called to keep moving along the path of personal and collective transformation, a part of which is being active learners, learners of self, of culture, of stories, of struggle, of liberation. That's what this faith is about. Healing and saving through personal and collective transformation. It's work. And it's worthwhile work because there is no other promise but the promise of love and justice in this life. The healing and saving message of universalism is that we need to become border people. All of us. Called to develop cultural competence and navigate with sensitivity and grace the communities around us. Called to be in alliance for the sake of ushering in the reign of God, God who is love, right here on earth. I have a passion for all this faith can be. Do you have a passion for this faith? Yes. Because at our very best, when we pause to remember who we are, companions on this grand experiment called life, when we take a moment to shed the ways we have been carefully taught to be, ways that tell us to lead from fear, that tell us we're separate, that tells us some people are superior to others, that tells us to punish the poor, that tells us to take from, that tells us to persecute those who do not look like we do, that tells us to deny rights to those who love. When we take a moment to shed all of that and hear our stories, hear and see each other into existence, into community. When we take a moment to embrace, practice a different way of being, learning about our own privilege and power, getting down in that work and knowing ourselves, dismantling systems of oppression inside our very institutions, even our institutions of faith, leading from love, because last night we learned, Tupac said, we are the love people, yes? When we question norms, seek out stories and perspectives that are not usually represented or heard, and work alongside those seeking economic and racial justice, arresting injustice. I love that phrase. When we stand on the side of love, when we dare to be the love people, then we are living into the promise of building the world we dream about. Then we are living with the intention of this faith. Then we are making active the plan to usher in the reign of love and justice right here, right now. Then we're enacting heaven. that dream of a place where holy justice reigns right here on earth, then we're focusing on healing our corner of this world. This, said Mitra this morning, is the church that will make us all free. We need our differences. It is a beautiful thing to dream, to cast our vision, to stretch our minds into the future and imagine what may be if we were to build a new way of being, not someday, but beginning today. Beginning again every day that we have breath. Taking courage with these hands and hearts to make real the dream, to journey together, seeking to be transformed even as we transform. Becoming explorers and learners in this world around us. Fulfilling the promise of healing a fragmented world. Laboring not just in hope, but also in love. In this spirit we gather. In this spirit we pray. I want to offer you now the voices of Unitarian Universalists around the country. These are quotes collected by Mark Hicks, and they speak to marginalization from within our community.
Throughout all my years as a parent and teacher in a religious education program at my home congregation, I felt the need for inclusion of materials that were culturally and racially relevant for my children. All the curriculum materials are from a dominant culture point of view. I felt that people got tired of my asking for alternative points of view to be represented by someone other than myself. I felt that some white adults were uncomfortable around my children. A number of times I felt that the religious education volunteers were afraid of my African American son. There were unconscious racist remarks made. Over the years, my children were often the only children of color in their RE classes. One Sunday in the youth group, an adult advisor said to my child, "When you wear those glasses, you don't look black." I had to make an extra effort to explain to my children that although the theology of Unitarian Universalism is wonderful, as with all faith, the practice falls short. I had to explain that they could not indulge in some of the more experimental activities of the youth group because the authorities looked at African American youth differently than white youth. I did connect my children to the wider UU community so that they could have an experience of more diversity. But I still worry about the effects of being isolated from a larger African American community of faith has had on my children.
Supriya, an Asian woman. What I find challenging within Unitarian Universalism is that although we claim that our living tradition draws on many sources, including wisdom from the world's religions, which inspires us in our ethical and spiritual life, this is something that I see very rarely in the many UU congregations I have visited in North America. As a first-generation Canadian, I struggle every Sunday with the fact that worship and the teachings from the pulpit provide me with little connection to the wisdom of my ancestors who were Hindus. Although I find strength in my Unitarian Universalist faith, I miss affirmation that my religious background is as important as the Judeo-Christian tradition. This makes me feel somewhat of an outsider, even within my own religious community. Being the child of immigrants, being an outsider, has always been a fact of life and has presented many challenges over time. One place where this challenge should not have to present itself is within a religious community. Although I chose Unitarian Universalism because it held more meaning to me than the religion of my ancestors. I also chose it based on the promise that we would be inspired by the wisdom of the world's religions. I have faith that that day will come.
Alicia, African-American woman. I came back to my congregation after I graduated from college. The racial and ethnic makeup of the congregation mirrored that of the now gentrified neighborhoods surrounding the church. I was not expecting to feel uncomfortable, but I did, instantly. I think it was the looks I received from the new white congregants. They were, "What are you doing here?" kind of looks. I wasn't sure if it was my hair, clothes, shoes, or what. But I understood those looks to mean I didn't belong. I'm a black woman in my 20s who attends a church where I'm free to dress as I want. I've always loved that about my congregation, but black urban styles of dress, I guess, made me look like a video girl to them, or at least that's what their eyes said. I felt like they probably thought I was uneducated and ill-mannered.
Phyllis, African-American woman. I'm sure I had marginalizing experiences in my congregation. However, you may find that for long-term members like me, the experiences were few enough and managed in such a way as to allow us to feel comfortable about our continued attendance. Most Unitarians are not shy about speaking out.
Those voices were from the UUA program, Building the World We Dream About. So I'm going to give you an overview of what that program is about. How many people have heard of it or have had experiences with it? It's actually a good number of you in the gathering. So this is a curriculum that was developed by the Unitarian Universalist Association designed to make the UUA more welcoming, inclusive, affirming, and just faith community for people of all races, ethnicities, and cultures seeking a liberal religious home. It was written by Mark Hicks in collaboration with Gail Forsyth Vale and Janice Marie Johnson, the Queen of Boston. And the voices you just heard, those are people speaking out of their real experiences. Those are people yearning for us to build the world that we dream about, not just beyond our walls, but also within our walls. And so the program invites us, through experiential learning, community building, and reflection, to share our stories about how race shapes our identity, our interactions with those we may consider other. So the program goals to promote a multicultural welcome, inclusion, and affirmation in all facets of Unitarian Universalist congregational life. To develop participants' knowledge and skills in addressing issues related to race, ethnicity, and cultural identity, both individually and institutionally, and to identify ways congregations can become multiracial, multicultural communities of love and justice. It occurs to me, as I was listening to Tupac speak last night, he used the phrase breaking down barriers, and that really is what building the world we dream about. That's what that program is about. It is about doing the internal work of not just looking at our individual prejudices, but also looking at the institution as an entire system, and then partnering or making alliances in the wider community to enact love and justice. I borrowed this slide from Annette because I thought it was such a great graphic. What are we talking about when we talk about multiracial, multicultural congregations? It's not an abstract. Michael Emerson, who is a sociologist, says that a multiracial, multicultural congregation is one in which no one racial group comprises more than 80% of the population. That's a multiracial congregation. So, in some sense, numbers matter. But what also matters, and I'll talk about this more later this afternoon, culture matters. So a congregation that is multiracial is one thing. No more than one racial group comprises more than 80% of the population. A congregation that then goes on to be multicultural is making yet another statement. They're shifting from living in a monocultural paradigm to moving into a multicultural paradigm. And I'll cover that in my workshop this afternoon. This I borrowed from the Reverend Jackie Lewis because I thought that it casts such a beautiful vision and harkens back to our past. And she says, Howard Thurman, whose church was incubated in a Unitarian Universalist congregation, said that the true church is an expression of the Spirit of the living God that calls humanity into relationship that transcends creed, race, gender, and even religion. Spirit is the ultimate source for the journey. As congregations embrace God's vision to lead God's people in the work of rehearsing the reign of love and justice on earth, we need spirit, breath, to enable conversations to build community. Spirit is the breath. Tupac said, it's the only currency. Spirit is the breath that enables creative speech and flows beneath the sharing of our storied selves. It both whispers softly, encouraging us to hear one another, and blows like four winds, putting new life on dead bones of resistance, to see the other as a gift from God. The Zulu people have a custom, the spirit of Ubuntu, which says, when we acknowledge one another, when we see each other, we truly exist. When we breathe our unique stories to the ears of the other, we both risk rejection and enable acknowledgement as well. Hearing others, we can see them for who they truly are. In revealing our storied selves, we see and hear each other into existence and into community. Hearing our own stories, we are more fully known to ourselves. What results is a deeper sense of self, a greater acceptance, and a greater acceptance of others around us. God's vision for right relationship and whole community, beloved community, and our vision become one. I've done a lot of talking in the last 20 or so minutes. That is not my usual. I did want to let you know some of what building the world we dream about is, because I want you to go home, look it up, and bring it to your congregations. But that won't happen by me telling you about it. And you heard the voices of some Unitarian Universalists who experience marginalization within the context of Unitarian Universalist community. You heard Duncan and Chris last night in their shared homily, speaking phrases like, I see bigotry where others don't have to see it. I'm not prejudiced, but I don't see why people have to live together when they shouldn't want to. We do not ask questions in our time. Who picks cotton? Who makes our clothes? Who grows our food? Who cleans our hotel rooms? How are they treated? My world, his world, her world, your world. Share your half of the story, which is what I'm inviting you to do now, which is what building the world we dream about is about. It is about sharing your half of the story and listening to another and seeing each other into being in community. So what we're going to do now is have a micro lab. And for the first 10 minutes, I'm going to invite you, for the first 5 minutes, I'm going to invite you to respond to the questions for yourselves. And there are handouts that will be passed around, and the questions are also up in this PowerPoint. So just take 5 minutes and reflect on them. Reflect on your own responses, and then you'll move into dialogue with someone else.
Frances, African-American woman. To be African-American in this country is to face racism throughout life, however subtle. The love of one's family is paramount in reducing the damage of racism on one's wholeness. Unitarian Universalism is splendid as an affirming church family. Its primary commitment to justice seeking. Its deep belief that every soul has irreducible value, and its belief that there is the spark of the divine in every one of us are powerful antidotes to the insistent racist voices among us. I find Unitarian Universalism not only soothing, but healing. It is a perfect medicine for the soul made sick by racism.
Peter, white man. Here and now, I don't feel affirmed living out issues of race. This is a dirty business willed to us by people who looked like me. However, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger, and I can do nothing without doing some harm. I am moving from being an etherized white man ignorant of race to being a European American man discomforted everywhere. From living in the world as oyster to a world without many places to belong. My participation at a self-consciously diverse Unitarian Universalist church dismantling racism in fits and starts has offered consolation. Despite my being and my action, my brothers and sisters remain authentically engaged with me in things that I get right and things that I get wrong. Like an unreformed drunk, since my culture will not yet allow me to live 1 hour, much less 1 day at a time, privilege-free. I must lean on the goodwill of my fellow travelers in this religious community I have chosen to join. It's their goodwill and its reflection of their perception of my goodwill that offers affirmation.
Kathy, African-American woman. After the September 11 terrorist attacks on the United States, the Muslim students at my daughter's very diverse high school began to segregate themselves because of their sense of fear and isolation. My daughter, who has spent her whole life attending a Unitarian Universalist congregation, reached out to these students. She actually made the long walk across the high school cafeteria to sit with the Muslim students and talk to them about how they were feeling. When I asked her why she had done this, my daughter told me that her faith had called her to do this. As a parent, I was so proud that my daughter had learned the lessons of non-discrimination and respect for all peoples within our Unitarian Universalist community. As an African-American parent, I was equally proud that my daughter understood the connection between her struggles as a young black woman in America and the struggles of other often marginalized groups. This affirmed for me that Unitarian Universalism has helped me raise a wonderful young woman.
Alicia, African-American woman. The only time I've ever felt affirmed as a person of color was in my congregation when I was growing up in the church. When I looked around the room at my friends in Sunday school, we were a diverse group. We were African-American, white, Hispanic, biracial, and multi-ethnic. The same was true in morning worship. Never did I look around the sanctuary and feel small or outnumbered. When I was 16, I went to the GA that was held in Indianapolis, Indiana. Most of the other black kids were so envious of my being raised in a church that was so diverse. It's what they expected in a major city, they being from small towns for the most part, so I felt very proud.
I would love to know what emerged for you out of your time of reflection and your time of dialogue. And I also want to honor our time. And so I'm going to trust that what happened was the start of a conversation, one that you will find ways to continue once we leave this day. And I also want to invite you to reflect on this knowing that you can be in conversation with me, with Annette, as you continue to do this multicultural work and ministry. One of the most frequent questions I get when I travel is, how do we do this work? Well, we begin with ourselves. We begin within the context of community. Whether it's using a program like Building the World We Dream About, or Jubilee, or forming alliances beyond the community, you begin somewhere, and there are many avenues. So I'll go back to Jackie Lewis. Hearing others, we can see them for who they truly are. In revealing our storied selves, we see and hear each other into existence and into community. Hearing our stories, we are more fully known to ourselves. What results is a deeper sense of self, a greater acceptance, and a greater acceptance of others around us. God's vision for right relationship and whole community, beloved community, and our vision become one. That is the dream. And we are on the path. And where we're not on the path, I'm inviting you to get on the path with me and with the congregations around you. So may it be.
About a year or so ago, along with some other traveling companions of mine from the Living Legacy Project, we gathered in the rolling hills of Tennessee in a place called the Highlander Center. And it was my first trip there. I felt so at home and so inspired by the place. It left a huge mark on me and makes me so excited today to be able to welcome visitors from the Highlander Center who are going to be sharing with us. There's something about that place that is hallowed ground. I visited again this summer with Reverend Jake Morrell. We had some food with folks and witnessed young people all around talking and energized. There's something special about that place. But I want to say something else. When we were at Highlander Center, Susan Williams, who's our speaker today, came and showed us around the place, gave us the history, sold us a lot of books, and became a conversation partner. And so we've had a few conversations over the last couple of months, and I am so excited not only to bring those folks from the Highlander Center, but to bring Susan Williams, who has done so much work in this area, has committed her life to doing community organizing with folks here, that we are twice blessed.
First, I am not an expert in building multicultural partnerships. I am someone who's been trying to do this and will be the rest of my life. I'm also not a UU person. I'm coming from a viewpoint of someone who's been a community organizer, popular educator, and now who knows a lot about the history of Highlander. And what I wanted to do with this time is share some of the history, not just by me talking, but by what we call living history, and then showing a DVD from our 75th anniversary. And I think that, just to say a little bit about me, I grew up in Oak Ridge, primarily in a white, middle-class community in this peculiar atomic town. Anybody from Oak Ridge? And so the dominant culture wasn't really Southern, it was class-based, and it revolved around the military-industrial complex, as I've come to understand. I've spent most of my life in Tennessee, but I've worked with people in Appalachia, people in the South, immigrant people, worked with people across Latin America fighting NAFTA, and so I've learned a lot and been trying to think about how do we all build anti-oppressive multicultural partnerships, particularly in the context of trying to do political work to change this country. And so my viewpoint is really from someone who's been working with people to organize around issues people care about to make this world more just. And I've had the privilege, much privilege of, besides being privileged as a white person, my greater privilege is having had the opportunity to work with people from mostly this region, to learn from them and learn what everything is, how many people are working to try to create a more just world, and that it's a long journey and it's very difficult. And so I just do want to say one thing about institutions, which is I really try to help people not romanticize Highlander. So I want to say that Highlander was really started, I'll get to the history in a minute, but this is around institutions and looking at your institution. Highlander was started in the 30s in Appalachia. It started as a white institution. And Highlander's been on a long path, still continuing of becoming anti-oppressive and multicultural. And it's a bumpy journey. And just like every institution, you reflect the oppression in the society. And so that's a lot of work for Highlander, and that's a lot of work that we're still trying to do. So I think that it's sort of easy to say, oh, I work on civil rights, so we must be good around race. Oh, I work on immigration, so I must be good on immigrant rights, on dealing with immigrants. So the really internal work of looking at yourself, looking at your institution, and thinking about ways to move, I think is really important. So there's both the internal story and the external story. And we'll get a little more to the internal story toward the end, but I wanted to first share, I've decided to show a DVD from our 75th instead of a history DVD because you won't be able to read it. But I think this is better actually because the 75th DVD will place us into the present with the voices that are there. Something about dreams. I mean, Highlander started in 1932 by young people in their 20s who had an idea that they could work with people in the South to change this region. And really started around issues of race. No, issues of class. Working a lot in a rural Appalachian white community and then later with the labor movement in the South. And it was really through a decision that work in the South had to be integrated that brought them into the civil rights movement in the 40s when they decided that no workshops would be segregated, would not be white and black people at Highlander. So it was really an institution that started around issues around class and came fairly quickly to issues around race, and those are still the primary issues today, I think. And there's other oppressions that relate to that, but those are the core, I think the core issues that are so firmly embedded in this country that just have to be shaken loose. And we start with ourselves and our institutions. And it's a long path, and I've learned a lot, and I've continued to learn. So that's where I'm not an expert. Everyone, we're going to all be teachers, and we're all going to be learners. So I first wanted to share some about the history, and then we'll talk a little bit about the methodology. And here's how we're going to share the history. I have a living history, we call it. So Christy's passing out. There's about 18 different pages, and everyone should pick one. And each page has a picture of someone that was related to Highlander history or present, and on the back an explanation about them. So everyone should get one of those. And then once we have them, I will explain what you're going to do. So what I want you all to do is read the back, get familiar with who you are right now, and then stand up and get out of your chairs as you're able and go introduce yourself to other people who have someone else. And the point of this is to give you an idea of lots of different people that have been part of Highlander's work and to learn more about the history and also to meet each other. So
I grew up in northern Michigan. My dad was management in the plant that all my friends' fathers worked as laborers in. So when I was growing up, that tension between management and labor was really present in my life. And it was something that I had to deal with. When my friends' dads went on strike, whose side was I on?
Well, I was randomly given Hollis Watkins, who's standing in front of a hurricane-damaged church on the Gulf Coast. But I was taken with the fact that I met Hollis Watkins on a Living Legacy pilgrimage that you heard about earlier and heard him sing, the founder of Southern Echo. So it was really kind of interesting to be the person that I met a few years ago.
But I realize I should explain what Highlander actually is. So it's a workshop center. And we have dormitories, we have a room, a circle room with rocking chairs in a circle. And people come there for workshops and meetings. And we also have a library and bookstore and archive. And we do work there, but we also go out and do work in communities. So it's the term comes from Paulo Freire in Brazil, but it's something that people do all around the world with oppressed communities, where people, it's the idea that everyone is a teacher and everyone is a learner, that education is an important part of helping organize and think about what to do for change, and that spaces where you can help people learn, no matter what their educational level, class, race, ethnic origin, geographic origin, language, if you can have people come together and learn from each other and build confidence and knowledge, then that can help people be able to move. And it's a way to, I think, deepen organizing so that you're not just dealing with an issue, but you're really trying to build people directly affected by issues to be able to take them on. And I think it's a really powerful concept, and it's a very political concept. So it's not just learning about yourself, learning more, but it's really about learning and trying to figure out what to do and what to do with each other. So it's also a collective concept. It's not about individual action, it's really about group action. So I think the political nature of it and the collective part of it are really important, and often people talk about it, but it's really just participatory adult education. I think having a political sense and having a collective sense is really critical, and in our individualized society, building a collective sense is really important for us. Highlander does serve as a reminder of a history of struggle in this region that is erased in many communities. And so most of the struggle did not happen at Highlander, although plenty of it did, but most of the really important struggles were in other communities, but those memories and those histories are not there. We had people come from the area of the Southern Tenant Farming Workers from the same towns where that happened, and most of them had never heard of it. Now it's a museum, so that's great. It's like the Clinton story, the Clinton 12. That story had been lost. Now I'm a kind of archivist, so I really want us to all try to find and remember the stories of struggle that help us to know where we came from and what it took to get there, and celebrate the people that did it, many of whose names are not known, like the Clinton 12. They're not famous, but they were amazing, those families there. So Clinton, Tennessee, just north of here, was the first court-ordered desegregation case in the country. It happened in, maybe the date, I'm terrible dates, 56?
Yes.
So there was a court order that there were some people that filed a lawsuit, and the court ruled that the school, Clinton, would be desegregated. At that point, there was a black school for younger kids in Clinton, but the high school kids had to be bused to, was it Austin? To Knoxville, bused on this little narrow, like 25W winding road every day. So some families in Clinton filed suit. The judge ruled the school should be desegregated. There was quite a fight. And they won. And the school was desegregated. A year later, the school was actually bombed. And no one was ever caught for that. Kids were bused to Oak Ridge for a while, to the elementary school I went to, which I only learned by hearing the story of Clinton 12. And then so it's a really interesting story, and it's a story that people don't know and wasn't remembered, but in the 90s, some people started trying to reclaim that story. And there's a great museum, so people should go see that museum. It's in Clinton. It's right near the courthouse, if anybody knows Clinton. It's called the Green McAdoo Cultural Center, and they renovated the old black school and turned it into a great museum, and it's really a beautiful thing. The best thing is there's life-size sculptures of the 12 young people that walk. So the black community was up on the hill, and they had to walk down the hill to the school. So there's statues of the 12 kids out front. And so we take our young people there, and they stand among these statues. It's really So we have all these pictures of the young people standing going like this among the Clinton 12 statues. So it's a great story, and the reason I really love it is that no one knows the story and it's not famous, but it's the kind of story that happens all over this world. Our programs are geared toward helping groups working for change to learn from each other and think about how to strategize and move. And so when Bernice described her description of coming, telling your story, hearing other people, getting a rest, having the space to think about where are you and what have you done and what else might you learn, that's a good description of what happens in Highlander, I think. I was just at one workshop and this one woman said, well, I came to Highlander workshop at Highlander and it was not very good. So I don't want to romanticize the workshops. But I did want to say something about methodology, because when I came to Highlander and people are like, it's the Highlander way, I'm like, well, what does that mean? And so I like to try to demystify it, because what we do at Highlander you can do anywhere. You can do this anywhere. And a lot of the language I hear you all talk about building the world we dream of, is really a lot like the methodology we use. The stories, welcoming people, sharing power, all that is really core to why Highlander still exists. Because we provide a space where people can really learn from each other and decide what to do and move.
Part of this work is about affirming and enacting different forms of currencies toward transforming a world of dominant and dominating power into a world of cooperative, shared power. And so some of this is recognizing and affirming other currencies. Some of it is also recognizing our own employment and deployment of money, of currency as many of us know it now. This cell phone is through the Credo phone plan, the Credo that used to be working assets. Somebody asked me yesterday, well, how's their customer service, or, you know, what's that? And frankly, I don't know. I have a phone through Credo because I like steering my money to a company whose values I believe in. Part of Justice GA next year, the mandate from the delegates of General Assembly last year, is to make sure that as much as possible we are steering economic resources toward partners and allies, because part of the impact we make throughout our daily lives in Arizona next summer and in the choices we make as we set up our lives is our economic impact, whether through our phone plans, through what we drive or if we drive, etc., etc. In that light, I want to tell you about lunch today. A couple of years ago, my family spent a couple of months in Mexico, and part of going around was the privilege, the opportunity to stay in the homes of families of people who had relatives who'd come to Oak Ridge. And so these were people, mostly my wife, Molly, had relationship with in Oak Ridge, and we got the chance to go visit their families in Mexico, throughout Mexico. One of her friends in Oak Ridge said, you've got to go see my family in Guanajuato, not the city, but sort of a ranch outside. And so she was in touch with her family, and the family said, no, you'll never find it without a map, and you know, it's so far out, it's so, you know, but we really want you to come. And I want to tell you that we did not visit that family there, and that ranch there, because they could not afford a stamp to mail the map to Tennessee. I want you to just think about that. We did not visit them because they couldn't afford a stamp. And so their, the man's daughter, who's up here now, is the woman who made lunch today. She has 4 children, lives in Oak Ridge. Her husband has just gotten out of construction where he had been injured and into working in fast food. She takes care of children to support, help support their family, and also makes tamales and meals, you know, for people, especially around Christmas, with Christmas tamales. So as we eat today, as we partake, we are participating not only in a rich culture, and food is always cultural expression. We are also participating in a deliberate economic choice instead of having Domino's Pizza brought in. We are supporting this family, which is heroically supporting their own family and enriching our community in Oak Ridge. Now I'd like to invite everyone into a moment of reflection, reverence, and prayer. Mother, Father, God, we give thanks for the opportunity to be here together, to receive wisdom, to breathe, to be, to open our hearts which have rusted shut, to consider again the choices we have made and the choices we will make, to rededicate ourselves to the dream out before us, the dream of a world woven together with the threads of love and of justice and of rich cultures that go back thousands of years. May we live up to the challenge and the invitation that is there in that dream, beckoning us forward and forward together. Amen. Blessed be. Shalom. Amen.
So, you went a few years ago.
I did. I went, and you can tell how important the stories are, because the stories, we are people of stories. The stories maintain us and call us into the next moment. I have no doubt about that. And yet there is something about the place that cannot be told. You can read about people crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge. You can think about that. You can imagine it. But there is nothing like going and being there and having that physical sensation of crossing the bridge. I came back really energized by this and wanting to take my entire congregation, and that just somehow didn't happen. But the principle is the same. The stories are important, and the place is important. You cannot. There's no substitute for being there in that space. Hopefully, you can take that experience back to the comfort of your home. This is where the slowness, the unfolding of the experience comes to life. Bring that experience home with you, and in the comfort of your home, in the comfort of your community, allow that story to work itself out. So nobody at all in my congregation took me up on going for 2 weeks to tour the states in the South. I had this idea that we could go someplace closer. We could go to just apply these principles would make some sense. Get out of our comfort zone, go someplace else, hear the story, see the sights. It's not just that we go and have the experience, but the other point here is that we bring it back in a way that empowers us to act. Once you cultivate that empathy, once your eyes are open to the injustice, there's no choice but to engage in an active way.
So that's why Judy and I and a larger team, including Annette Marquis and Donna Seguera, have been taking people through Alabama and Mississippi to places like Birmingham, Marion, Selma, Hayneville, Montgomery, Meridian, Philadelphia, Jackson, Greenwood, Money, Ruleville, Oxford, Mississippi. It's for those encounters.
It's inevitable at times that I will put the interests of my particular group, whether it be my religion, my community, or my nation, ahead of yours. That's the human condition. This is not to condone selfishness or sectarianism or nationalism. To admit that I have times that I will inevitably put my natural sympathies first is not an excuse for selfishness. But to the extent that I can recognize that in myself, I am obliged to resist or deny those tendencies. But even then, no matter how hard I try, I will never be completely able to escape such tendencies, and neither will you. One of the sermons that I also got from Niebuhr is, I call the spiritual discipline against resentment. And the core of that is that I have to recognize that I hope that you can forgive me, community that I'm part of, because I'm going to screw up. I hope you can forgive me. I don't want to just have you tolerate me. I hope you can forgive me, and then I can forgive you. If I just tolerate, then I'm prone to being caught in the toxic trap of spiritual resentment.
Does it also give you license to do whatever?
I don't think it gives me license at all.
I think that sometimes the work that we do around anti-oppression is so fraught with our own power and privilege that we're bound to make mistakes that we don't even intend to make.
Right.
And I think that sometimes we get mired in our feelings of guilt and looking, and then it becomes all about us again instead of about the work that we're trying to do. So if there's forgiveness, then we don't have to wallow in our own self-pity and feelings of guilt for those mistakes that we may not have intended that we made. And that's been a great learning for me, is that even though it's me that did the act, it's not about me, it's about the work. And so if I can focus on that and maybe expect forgiveness, that means that then I can forgive myself and keep going with the work.
Right. Whenever I do a pastoral prayer, I always include in it this line: forgive our weak and deliberate offenses, just as we must forgive others when they hurt us.
In many instances, because we haven't yet addressed the issue of what we lose and what we gain when we make big change, leaves a lot of people more comfortable staying where they are. In other words, we know it's probably a good idea to change. We think that's probably the right thing to do. But, this is my congregation. This is the way it's always been. This is how it's comfortable. So I'm going to just keep a little toe into here just because this is what I know. And then we move all the way over to fully inclusive, because there are people in our congregations who deeply believe that they need to make this change. And it's not, and we talk about the difference between it being an intellectual exercise and a spiritual exercise. And my worry, and I'll speak for myself, but I think other people in the group may agree with me, is that this is primarily often an intellectual exercise. So it doesn't carry the spiritual, emotional context with it. It's, we've got 5 hours to do anti-racism this month. And once we've done that, then we've done our job. And if it were deeply felt and deeply internalized as part of us, there would be no way that we could stop at that. Without costing ourselves something deep to us. And so we think that there's some work that needs to be done along that line of how do we transfer from an intellectual exercise to something that is deeply spiritual and deeply relevant to us both personally and institutionally, and we don't think we're there yet.
Here I want to tell you a very quick story about our congregation in San Jose, which is one of the few has a Spanish-speaking ministry. And they were doing some really good work with a community organization around working with ICE to stop harassing people who appear to be immigrants in their community. And they had this great meeting one night, members of the congregation and members of this community organization, and they came up with a great plan to take to the law enforcement and to ICE agents. And at the end of putting this plan together, somebody said, well, did we ask those who will be most affected by this decision how they'd like us to proceed? And they hadn't. And when they did, that plan did not work for those people. And so that's what accountability means to me, is do you have the right people around the table to be in conversation with? And then if the right people are around the table, are they actively engaged? Are you sharing power in that process of decision making? Values, applying anti-oppression, anti-racism, multicultural lens to decision making. And policies and practices reflect commitment to social justice, particularly with regard to historically oppressed identity groups. One of the things that occurs to me around values is around budgeting. How many of you in your congregations have a budget line for anti-racist, anti-oppressive multicultural training? Is it reflected in your mission and your vision? That is one step. Do you have a strategic plan that encompasses how you're going to do multicultural education and resourcing? That's another step. And are you committing the funds to do this work? That's another step. How are you growing community partnerships? That's also a piece of it. So it's the internal work in the congregation, and then there's the external work. And it's not, it's written down somewhere. It's incorporated into your vision. The leadership takes ownership of it. It is not the minister's vision, it belongs to the congregation. Interrupting business as usual, I think, is really difficult. Because it requires, especially when you're looking at something like, say, a board meeting or a finance committee meeting, it requires that you know who your allies are around the table. And trust that those people will be there with you when you do that. And also that you have a process in place for that kind of interruption. So I'm thinking of our congregation in Oakland. That is an intentional multicultural congregation. And they do process observation at their board meeting. And if you are stuck and you want to know more about process observation, talk to me offline. We have one that has been developed for the Journey Towards Wholeness Committee that I think is really effective. And it is just a built-in way to be able to stop and check and say, here's what went well, here's where we missed the mark, here's how we can be accountable.
Little Black Sambo. I'm a child of the 40s, and so that was a book my daddy read to it. Who knew? And then I became a teacher in the 60s, and we were pulling books off the shelves like crazy with consciousness raising about race and justice. And Little Black Sambo was definitely one of those we pulled off our shelf. I remember it and loving it so much. Then, in the same year, Julius Lester and Jerry Pinkney put together an American version of Sam and the Tigers. And he, he wears his fancy clothes, but the animal characters in here, and they make pancakes at the end with the butter that the tigers have made whipping around those trees. But look at the life in here. You are in this story. Look at him with his purple pants and his red jacket. It's just so exciting. They're the tigers now, bigger than life. Bigger than life, ready to take one item at a time away from little Sam. And they're fearsome. And it just holds your attention, so it's that good old story, but told in a sympathetic way by two African Americans who put a southern kind of African American twist on this story. Love that wrapper.
We then have to worry about the animals, don't we?
Yeah, I don't know about that, all the animal lovers, yeah, we have to come to it. Although, let me say that, again, in the 70s, when Women's Lib came around, and everybody knew I was a big folktale lover, passionate about these stories, well, we can't read those anymore. The women are always, they're not dominant.
Always victimized.
They're, exactly. I went, wait a minute, let's think about this. Wait a minute, I cannot not read folktales. And we found Molly Whuppie, which is a jack tale where the woman plays all the roles, of a jack. And it's a traditional British Isles tale. It's not a fractured tale. Nobody just invented it in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, but there it is, an old, old tale where a strong female comes up and runs through the 3 tasks that the giant has set forth. Scandinavian stories have strong women in them. Some Japanese stories have great, strong women. So my answer then, whenever, well, no, they're not reading anymore because women are not, they're subservient. I said, you can balance. You got to keep the old and keep the new. And isn't that a wonderful discussion to make?
So we as Unitarian Universalists have a rich diversity and a very rich theological grounding to draw from in doing the work of multiculturalism. We come from an ancestry of people who believed in working for the equality of all, and that carries through our theology, the way that we live our lives, the values that we have, and we can build on that. Where we need to go is to really do internal work about how we begin to see a world, a congregation even, that allows for many people to walk in the door. We need to be able to come to a change process that allows it not to be a loss, but rather to be an adventure of bringing in the life that exists outside our walls and mingle and mix with it and bring it all alive and infuse it into what we already have to make it more whole, more vibrant, and more accessible, and to save lives.
Yes, thank you.
Amen.
Amen.
First of all, I'm really proud of the denomination for having dedicated resources and staff and people who will go around the country to the districts and help us have these discussions, because that says something about where our values are. And what I'd love to see is on the congregational level, the same expression of values. Because I think we share the value. Even among some of the most conservative UUs, they would say, you know, they want racial equality, they want racial justice, they want the world to be a fairer and more equitable place, no matter what your, you know, ethnicity, race, classification is economically. Even some would probably even go into whether you're able-bodied. And certainly, as a gay man, I feel safe in most UU gatherings. But I want us to look at our own UU culture and see where are we perpetuating some things that are not really consistent with those values. And it's through that hard look at what we are currently doing and how we can alter it or tweak it to make it better. And because I'm newly out of seminary, I'm just thinking about, is it really true that if I am a member of the congregation and feeling called into ministry or contemplating my place in the ministry of the Unitarian Universalist denomination, do we have it set up so that if you have the skills and abilities, you can get through that process? And that nothing will hold you back based on where you are economically, based on where you are racially or gender-wise. The expensive seminary, I think, really prohibits a lot of folks from pursuing it, because historically the people who have least access to large amounts of economic power quickly, conveniently, as a young person, are white people. And so that's just something we might want to look at. Are we credentialing only the privileged? And the other thing is that same level of being willing to look at ourselves as a collective on the congregational level is are the way we sing our songs. Is it open? Nothing wrong with the way we sing our songs, but is it open? Is the way we conduct our business as Unitarians an open process, or one that's easily adapted for somebody else? Or do you have to become like us to be a part of us? And if that isn't possible, are you really welcome?
I think part of what we bring is just the history. We've been sort of rebels with a cause for a long time. And so I think we bring that legacy of resistance, and we understand resistance quite well. The part about the multiculturalism, I think, is challenging for us, but we have to just stay open-minded and remember that we are here together, and we'll make it. We'll get there.
Spread love out into the world. This world needs it, and you've got it.